The dusty plains of Montana Territory shimmered under the scorching July sun of 1876 as Fiona Winters stepped off the stagecoach, her face pale with exhaustion but her chin held high despite the whispers that followed her like persistent shadows. The small mining town of Silver Creek wasn't much to look at, a single dirt road lined with weathered buildings, but it represented something she desperately needed: a fresh start. "Miss Winters, I presume?" A stern-faced woman approached, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I'm Mrs. Holloway, owner of the boarding house. Your aunt described you in her letter, though she failed to mention your condition." Fiona instinctively placed a hand over her rounded belly. 5 months pregnant and unwed, she had become the scandal of Boston society, disowned by her parents and sent west to her mother's estranged sister, who, as luck would have it, had passed away just 2 weeks before Fiona's arrival. "My aunt's letter reached me too late," Fiona explained, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I had already begun my journey." Mrs. Holloway's lips thinned to a disapproving line. "Well, I suppose you can stay at the boarding house until you decide what to do. Though I'll warn you, Silver Creek isn't kind to women of questionable virtue." The words stung, though Fiona had grown accustomed to such judgments. She followed Mrs. Holloway down the dusty street, aware of the curious stares from townsfolk going about their business. Her fine Eastern dress, though travel-worn, marked her as an outsider as clearly as the child she carried. "Your room is upstairs, last door on the left," Mrs. Holloway said when they reached the boarding house. "Dinner's at 6, don't be late." Alone in the small, sparsely furnished room, Fiona finally allowed her shoulders to slump. She sat heavily on the narrow bed, her gloved hands trembling as she removed her hat. 22 years old, carrying the child of a man who had promised marriage only to reveal he was already wed, abandoned by her family, and now stranded in a frontier town where she knew no one. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. Crying wouldn't help her situation. A knock at her door startled her. She hastily wiped her eyes and smoothed her dress before opening it. A young woman with kind eyes and a freckled face stood in the hallway. "Thought you might want some fresh water for washing up." She carried a pitcher and basin. "I'm Clara, Mrs. Holloway's niece. I help around here." "Thank you, I'm Fiona Winters." Clara set the basin on the dresser. "If you don't mind me saying, you look like you could use a friend in town." Fiona's throat tightened. "I suppose I could." "Mrs. Holloway's bite is worse than her bark," Clara assured her. "And not everyone in Silver Creek is as judgmental as she is." She hesitated. "Though I should warn you about the Wilkerson sisters. They run the dress shop and consider themselves the moral guardians of the town. They'll be at dinner tonight." Fiona managed a wan smile. "I've dealt with plenty of moral guardians recently." "I bet you have," Clara said sympathetically. "Rest up. I'll call you when dinner's ready." As promised, the Wilkerson sisters Mabel and Dorothy were at dinner, their pinched expressions souring further when Fiona entered the dining room. 4 other boarders, 2 elderly prospectors, a schoolteacher, and a traveling salesman regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Holloway announced, "this is Miss Winters from Boston. She'll be staying with us for a while." "Boston, eh?" one of the prospectors said. "Long way from home. And traveling in her condition," Dorothy Wilkerson whispered loudly to her sister. "Shameful." Fiona kept her eyes on her plate as conversation resumed around her. The food was plain but filling: roast beef, potatoes, and green beans. She ate quietly, feeling the weight of judgment pressing down on her. "Don't you worry about them," Clara whispered, sliding into the chair beside her. "They treat any unmarried woman under 30 like she's one step away from ruin." "In my case, they're not wrong," Fiona murmured. Clara squeezed her arm. "Everyone's got a story. Yours isn't finished yet." After dinner, rather than remain in the stuffy boarding house under the Wilkerson sisters' scrutiny, Fiona decided to explore the town. The evening air had cooled slightly, bringing relief from the day's heat. Silver Creek was beginning to come alive with its nighttime activities. The saloon down the street was already filling with miners and cowboys, piano music spilling out into the street. She walked toward the general store, now closed for the evening, and peered through the window at the goods displayed inside. She would need to find work soon if she was to support herself and her child. Her small savings wouldn't last long. Not much selection compared to Boston, I'd wager. Fiona turned to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he was handsome, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble. He wore the practical clothing of a working man: denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and a leather vest. "It's adequate, I'm sure," she replied cautiously. He stepped closer, and she could now see his eyes, a striking hazel that seemed to shift between green and brown in the evening light. "Aaron Lockhart," he introduced himself, tipping his hat. "I run the Lazy L Ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Fiona Winters." She didn't offer her hand, keeping them clasped protectively over her belly. His gaze flickered briefly to her midsection, but his expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. "New to Silver Creek, arrived today." "Well, Miss Winters, it's not Boston, but it has its charms once you get to know it." His smile was genuine, creating lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he spent much of his time outdoors. Before she could respond, the Wilkerson sisters emerged from the millinery shop across the street. "Mr. Lockhart," Mabel called, hurrying over. "How lovely to see you in town. Dorothy just finished a new hat that would look splendid on your sister." "I'll be sure to tell her," Aaron replied politely, though Fiona thought she detected a hint of resignation in his voice. Dorothy's gaze shifted to Fiona, her expression cooling. "Miss Winters, I see you've met one of our most eligible bachelors." The implication was clear. Someone like Fiona had no business speaking with someone like Aaron Lockhart. "We were just exchanging pleasantries," Fiona said stiffly. "Indeed," Aaron agreed, though something in his tone suggested irritation with the interruption. "Miss Winters was admiring our fine general store." Mabel hummed disapprovingly. "Miss Winters, should you not be resting in your condition?" Fiona's cheeks burned. "The evening air is refreshing after my journey." "Well, we mustn't keep you," Dorothy said pointedly to Aaron. "I'm sure you have business to attend to." Aaron's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, I was about to invite Miss Winters to join me for coffee at the hotel restaurant. They serve a fine apple pie." The sisters' matching expressions of shock might have been comical under different circumstances. Fiona herself was taken aback by the unexpected invitation. "That's very kind," she said carefully, "but I should return to the boarding house." "Another time, perhaps," he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Good evening, ladies." With another tip of his hat, he continued down the street toward the saloon. "My dear," Mabel said once he was out of earshot, her voice dripping with false concern, "you should know that Aaron Lockhart is practically promised to Caroline Mercer, the banker's daughter. Besides, a man like him, respected, successful, would never seriously court a woman in your situation." "I wasn't aware we were courting," Fiona replied coolly. "Now if you'll excuse me." She walked back to the boarding house with her head high, though the sisters' words echoed painfully in her mind. They were only saying what everyone thought, what she herself had been told repeatedly since discovering her pregnancy. No decent man would want her now. She would never be loved, never have a proper family. Her child would bear the stigma of illegitimacy forever. Yet for a brief moment, when Aaron Lockhart had looked at her without judgment in his eyes, she had felt like a person again, not just a scandal, not just a cautionary tale, but a woman worthy of basic courtesy. It was a small comfort, but that night, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the distant sounds of the frontier town, she held onto it like a precious thing. The next morning, Fiona dressed in her simplest gown, a navy blue cotton with minimal trimming, and set out to find employment. Her late aunt had owned a small seamstress shop which had been sold upon her death, but Fiona hoped her own sewing skills might be useful somewhere in town. The general store owner, Mr. Finch, listened politely to her inquiry but shook his head. "Don't need help at present, Miss Winters." "And with your condition?" He trailed off, uncomfortable. The hotel manager was more direct. "Can't have someone in your state working where guests might see. Bad for business." By midday, after 5 rejections, Fiona sat on a bench outside the post office, fighting despair. Her money would last perhaps 2 months at most, after that. Miss Winters. She looked up to find Aaron Lockhart standing before her, looking even more handsome in the daylight. He wore a different shirt today, cream-colored cotton, but the same worn leather vest and denim pants. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark brown hair in need of a trim. Mr. Lockhart. Any luck finding work? At her surprised expression, he added, Clara mentioned you were looking. News travels fast in small towns. So I'm discovering, and no, it seems my skills aren't needed here. She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. He sat beside her, leaving a respectable distance between them. What skills might those be? I'm an accomplished seamstress. I also play piano, speak French, and can keep accounts, though I doubt any of those will prove useful in Silver Creek. You'd be surprised, he said thoughtfully. My ranch could use someone with accounting skills. My foreman tries his best, but numbers aren't his strong suit. Fiona stared at him. You're offering me a job, I'm considering it. The ranch house has a separate wing where my sister lives when she visits from Denver. You could stay there, keep the books, maybe help with some household matters. My cook, Lewis, handles most things, but he'd welcome the assistance. Why would you do this? You don't know me. His expression turned serious. I know what it's like to need a second chance, Miss Winters, and I judge people by their character, not their circumstances. It seemed too good to be true. The townspeople will talk. They already do, he said with a wry smile. I'm 32, unmarried, and stubbornly refuse to court Caroline Mercer despite her father's not-so-subtle hints. Adding you to the mix will just give them something new to gossip about. Fiona hesitated. Working and living at Aaron Lockhart's ranch would provide the security she desperately needed, but it might also cement her reputation as a fallen woman. Then again, that reputation was already firmly established. When would you need me to start? I'm heading back to the ranch tomorrow morning. Take the day to think about it. If you decide to accept, be ready at 8. I'll stop by the boarding house. After he left, Fiona remained on the bench weighing her options. In truth, there weren't many. She could stay in town, continue fruitlessly searching for work, and watch her savings dwindle. Or she could accept Aaron's offer and at least have security for herself and her child, even if it came with additional gossip. There you are, Clara appeared, carrying a basket of groceries. Mrs. Holloway sent me looking for you. It's almost lunchtime. As they walked back to the boarding house, Fiona told Clara about Aaron's offer. The Lazy L is a good outfit, Clara said. Aaron Lockhart has a solid reputation. He's fair to his men, pays well, and doesn't indulge in the usual cowboy vices. She paused. Some folks might raise eyebrows at you living out there, but if it were me, I'd take the job in a heartbeat. Even with my situation, Clara smiled. Especially with your situation. You need security now more than ever. At the boarding house, the news of Aaron's offer had somehow preceded her. The Wilkerson sisters were already at the lunch table, their expressions thunderous. Miss Winters, Mabel began without preamble, we understand you're considering a position at the Lockhart Ranch. News certainly travels fast in Silver Creek, Fiona remarked, taking her seat. It's highly inappropriate, Dorothy declared. A single woman in your condition, living at a bachelor's ranch, think of your reputation. Fiona couldn't help the laugh that escaped her. My reputation, I arrived in town visibly pregnant and unmarried. I doubt there's much left to salvage. Well, I never. Mabel pressed a hand to her chest in exaggerated shock. It's not just your reputation at stake, Dorothy insisted. Aaron Lockhart is one of this town's most respected citizens. This arrangement could damage his standing in the community. Mr. Lockhart seems capable of making his own decisions, Fiona replied calmly, though inside doubt had begun to gnaw at her. Was she being selfish in accepting his offer? After lunch, she retreated to her room, mulling over her decision. A knock at her door revealed Mrs. Holloway, her expression unusually concerned rather than stern. Miss Winters, may I speak frankly? Of course. The older woman entered, closing the door behind her. I'm not one to mince words. Your situation is precarious. This town, like most, can be cruel to women who don't conform to expectations. Fiona braced herself for more criticism. That said, Aaron Lockhart is a good man. I've known him since he was a boy. If he's offered you a position, it's because he sees value in you, not because he has unsavory intentions." She paused. The Wilkerson sisters have their reasons for objecting, namely their niece Caroline, whom they've been trying to match with Aaron for years. Their concern is not for your welfare or his reputation. Surprised by this unexpected support, Fiona asked, "You think I should accept his offer?" "I think you should do what's best for you and your child." Mrs. Holloway moved toward the door. "And don't worry about what people say. They'll talk regardless of what you do." By evening, Fiona had made her decision. She packed her few belongings and settled her bill with Mrs. Holloway, prepared to leave in the morning. Clara helped her organize her things, chattering about the Lazy L Ranch. "It's one of the largest in the territory. Aaron's father started it from nothing. When he died 5 years ago, Aaron took over and expanded it further." She folded a shawl and placed it in Fiona's trunk. "His sister Elizabeth lives in Denver with her husband, a railroad executive. She only visits a few times a year." "What about his mother?" "Died when he was young. That's partly why he and Elizabeth are so close." Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "You know, despite what the Wilkersons say, Aaron isn't promised to Caroline Mercer. He's never shown any interest in her beyond politeness." "His romantic entanglements aren't my concern," Fiona said primly, though she couldn't deny a flutter of curiosity. "I'll be his employee, nothing more." Clara gave her a knowing look but said nothing further. At precisely 8 o'clock the next morning, Aaron arrived at the boarding house with a wagon. He helped load Fiona's trunk and then assisted her onto the seat beside him, his strong hands gentle as he steadied her. The Wilkerson sisters watched from across the street, their disapproval evident even at a distance. Several other townspeople paused in their morning activities to observe Fiona's departure, whispering among themselves. "Ready?" Aaron asked, seemingly oblivious to the attention. "Yes." Fiona straightened her back, refusing to show any sign of uncertainty. As they drove out of town, the tension in her shoulders gradually eased. The Montana landscape opened before them, rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers, distant mountains rising blue against the horizon. The beauty of it momentarily distracted her from her worries. "It's breathtaking," she murmured. Aaron glanced at her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Different from Boston, I imagine. Completely, everything there is, contained, ordered. This feels wild and free. That's why I could never leave, even when my sister tried to convince me to join her in Denver. This land gets in your blood." They traveled in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and the creak of the wagon wheels the only sounds. Fiona found herself stealing glances at Aaron's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight squint of his eyes as he gazed at the horizon, the way the sun brought out auburn highlights in his brown hair. "You mentioned yesterday that you know what it's like to need a second chance," she ventured. "May I ask what you meant?" He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I fought for the Union in the war. When I came home in '65, I was changed, angry, restless. I spent 2 years wandering, working cattle drives, getting into fights in saloons, basically doing my best to self-destruct. What changed? My father tracked me down in Dodge City, found me half dead after a brawl, brought me home and gave me responsibility for the east section of the ranch. Said if I was determined to destroy myself, I could at least be useful while doing it." He smiled slightly at the memory. "Turned out having purpose again was what I needed. The land and the work healed something in me." Fiona absorbed this, seeing him in a new light. "That's why you're giving me this chance. You understand how it feels to need a fresh start." He nodded. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to rebuild. Some folks in town might have written you off, but they don't know your story, and frankly, it's none of their business." By midday, they reached the Lazy L Ranch. Fiona's first impression was of orderly prosperity. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure built of solid timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings, a bunkhouse, stables, a smithy, and what appeared to be a cookhouse formed a loose semicircle around a central yard. Beyond, cattle grazed in vast fenced pastures. "Home," Aaron said simply as he pulled the wagon to a stop. A Mexican man in his 50s emerged from the house, followed by a younger cowboy with a shock of red hair. "Lewis, this is Miss Winters, our new bookkeeper," Aaron introduced, "and this is Matt, my foreman." "Welcome to Lazy L, señorita," Lewis said warmly. "I have prepared the east wing for you as Mr. Lockhart instructed." Matt tipped his hat. "Madam, good to have you here. Boss has been making a mess of the ledgers." Aaron rolled his eyes. "I'm not that bad. Last month you recorded the same cattle sale twice and couldn't figure out why the numbers didn't add up," Matt said with good-natured ribbing. Fiona found herself smiling at their easy rapport. It spoke well of Aaron as an employer that his workers felt comfortable teasing him. Lewis showed her to her quarters, a comfortable suite with a bedroom, small sitting room, and private bath. The furnishings were simple but well made, and large windows let in plenty of light and offered views of the mountains. "My quarters are behind the kitchen," Lewis explained. "I serve breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, and dinner at 6. If you need anything between meals, the pantry is always open." "Thank you, it's all lovely." "Mr. Lockhart said you would help with household matters as well as the books." "Yes, I'm happy to assist however I can." Lewis nodded approvingly. "Good, I manage well enough, but a woman's touch would be welcome. The office is downstairs next to the library. Mr. Lockhart said you should rest today and start tomorrow." Left alone, Fiona unpacked her belongings, arranging her modest wardrobe in the cedar armoire. The space already felt more like home than the boarding house had. Here, at least, she wouldn't have to endure constant disapproving glances. A knock at her door revealed Aaron, holding a stack of ledgers. "I know I said you could start tomorrow, but I thought you might like to see what you're getting into." She invited him in, and they sat at the small table by the window, Aaron explaining the ranch's bookkeeping system. Despite Matt's teasing, the ledgers were reasonably well organized, though Fiona quickly spotted several inconsistencies. "You've been recording expenses under the wrong categories," she explained, showing him a page, "and your inventory tracking needs refinement. See, this is why I need you." He grinned, and Fiona felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at his boyish smile. "I can run cattle, but numbers make my head spin." They worked through the afternoon, Fiona growing more comfortable in his presence as they focused on the task at hand. She found him to be intelligent and quick to learn, with a dry wit that occasionally surfaced in his comments. At dinner, she joined Aaron, Lewis, and Matt in the main dining room. The food was excellent roast chicken, potatoes with herbs, fresh bread, and vegetables from the kitchen garden. "Lewis is the best cook in the territory," Aaron declared, helping himself to seconds. "Half my cowboys stay on because of his food." "It's true," Matt agreed. "The Diamond T tried to poach him last year with higher wages." Lewis shrugged modestly. "The Diamond T does not have a proper kitchen. A cook needs the right tools." The easy conversation continued throughout the meal, with none of the tension or judgment Fiona had experienced at the boarding house. When the men discussed ranch business, they included her naturally, explaining terms she didn't understand without condescension. That night, lying in her comfortable bed, Fiona felt a cautious optimism stir within her. Perhaps here, away from society's harsh gaze, she could build a new life for herself and her child. Aaron Lockhart had given her more than employment, he'd offered her dignity. The next few weeks fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent organizing the ranch's accounts, afternoons helping Lewis with household matters or working in the small kitchen garden, and evenings often passed in the library, where Aaron had an impressive collection of books. She discovered that despite his rugged exterior, Aaron was well-read and knowledgeable on subjects ranging from animal husbandry to classical literature. They often discussed books late into the evening, sitting in comfortable chairs by the fireplace, even though summer meant it remained unlit. The baby grew, and with it, Fiona's confidence. Free from constant scrutiny, she found herself smiling more, laughing easily at Lewis's jokes or Matt's tall tales. The ranch hands treated her with respectful courtesy, tipping their hats when they passed her and occasionally bringing her wildflowers they'd found while riding the range. As for Aaron, she couldn't deny her growing attraction to him. It wasn't just his handsome features or the way his shirt stretched across broad shoulders. It was his kindness, his integrity, the gentle way he spoke to his horses, the respect he showed to every person on his ranch regardless of their position. But she kept these feelings carefully guarded. Her situation was precarious enough without developing romantic notions about her employer. Besides, despite his kindness, she couldn't imagine a successful rancher like Aaron Lockhart would ever see her as more than an employee in need of assistance. One evening in late August, as they sat in the library discussing a novel they'd both read, Aaron suddenly asked, "Do you miss Boston?" The question caught her off guard. "Sometimes. I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, walking in the public garden in spring. But I don't miss the constraints, the constant pressure to conform. You seem happier than when you first arrived." "I am," she smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to her rounded belly, now 7 months along. "Here I can just be myself, not someone's scandal or cautionary tale." Aaron's gaze followed her movement. "May I ask about the baby's father? You don't have to answer." Fiona hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "His name was James Sullivan. His family owns shipping interests in Boston. We met at a literary society meeting and he courted me for 6 months. He was charming, well-spoken, passionate about poetry and politics." She sighed. "When I told him about the baby, he admitted he was already married to a woman in New York. He offered money, which I refused. My parents were devastated by the disgrace. They gave me enough funds to reach my aunt and made it clear I shouldn't return." Aaron's expression darkened. "He took advantage of your trust. The disgrace is his, not yours. That's a rather progressive view." "Maybe so, but it's what I believe. A man who abandons his responsibilities isn't worthy of the name." They sat in silence for a moment, the ticking of the mantel clock the only sound in the room. "What will you do after the baby comes?" Aaron finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Continue working here if you'll have me, save what I can, eventually perhaps open a small seamstress shop somewhere." "You're welcome to stay as long as you wish," he said quietly. "The ranch is better with you here." Their eyes met across the space between their chairs, and something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding, perhaps even longing. The moment was broken by Lewis entering with a telegram. "From your sister in Denver, Patron." Aaron read it quickly, his brow furrowing. "Elizabeth's coming for a visit. She'll arrive on Friday's stage." "I'll prepare her usual room," Lewis said after he left. Aaron turned to Fiona. "I should warn you, my sister can be opinionated. Is she concerned about my presence here?" "Elizabeth doesn't know about you yet. But she's protective of me, and she has definite ideas about propriety." He ran a hand through his hair. "Don't worry, she'll come around once she gets to know you," but Fiona did worry. Elizabeth Lockhart Bennett arrived like a whirlwind on Friday afternoon, elegantly dressed, sharp-eyed, and clearly surprised to find a pregnant, unmarried woman installed in her family home. "Aaron, darling, you might have mentioned your new arrangement in your letters," she said after introductions had been made, her tone cool as she appraised Fiona. "Fiona is our bookkeeper and household manager," Aaron explained, "and a friend." Elizabeth's perfectly arched eyebrow indicated what she thought of that explanation. "How?" "Unconventional." Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Elizabeth peppered Fiona with questions about her background, her education, her family, each inquiry polite on the surface but probing beneath. Fiona answered honestly but carefully, aware she was being evaluated, and the baby's father. Elizabeth finally asked, "Is he aware of your whereabouts?" "Elizabeth," Aaron warned, "it's a reasonable question, brother dear. If this man has obligations, he made his position quite clear," Fiona interrupted, keeping her voice steady. "He wants nothing to do with either of us." Elizabeth's expression softened slightly. "I see. Well, that's unfortunate." After dinner, Aaron excused himself to check on a sick calf, leaving the women alone in the parlor. Fiona braced herself for more interrogation. "My brother is a good man," Elizabeth began, surprising Fiona with her directness. "Too good sometimes. He sees someone in need and can't help but offer assistance. I'm aware of his generosity." "Are you also aware that he's developing feelings for you?" Fiona's heart skipped. "Aye." "That's not possible." Elizabeth studied her thoughtfully. "You really don't see it, do you? The way he looks at you when you're not watching, how he mentioned you in every letter for the past month," she sighed. I came here prepared to dislike you, to warn you against taking advantage of my brother's kindness, but I can see you're equally oblivious to his affections. Mr. Lockhart has been kind to me, nothing more, Fiona insisted, though her pulse had quickened at Elizabeth's words. Aaron hasn't shown interest in any woman since Mary Peterson died during the war. They were engaged before he enlisted. Elizabeth's expression softened further. When he returned, he was changed, more reserved, less willing to open his heart. Until now, Fiona shook her head. Even if what you say is true, it makes no sense. I'm carrying another man's child. I have nothing to offer him. Accept yourself, Elizabeth said simply, which, from what I've observed today, might be precisely what he wants. That night, Fiona lay awake, Elizabeth's words echoing in her mind. Could it be true? Had Aaron developed feelings for her? And if so, what did that mean for her future, for her child's future? The next morning, she found Aaron in the stables, checking the injured leg of a chestnut mare. He looked up as she approached, his face brightening. Good morning. Did you sleep well? Not particularly. She took a deep breath. Your sister and I had an interesting conversation last night. His expression turned wary. Oh, she seems to think you harbor certain feelings for me. Aaron straightened, his gaze steady. Elizabeth never could mind her own business. Is she wrong? A long moment passed between them. Then quietly, no, she's not wrong. Fiona's heart thundered in her chest. Aaron, I don't understand. Why would you? Why would I fall in love with you? He stepped closer, his voice low and intense. Because you're brave and resilient. Because you're intelligent and kind. Because watching you build a new life here, despite everything you've faced, has been like watching a flower bloom in desert soil, miraculous and beautiful. I'm carrying another man's child, she whispered, a child who will need a father. He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his larger ones. I know this seems sudden, and perhaps it is, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. What about the town, the gossip? Let them talk. We'll give them something worth gossiping about. His mouth curved in a smile. They said you'd never be loved, Fiona, but I already do. I love you, and if you'll let me, I want to love your child too. Tears filled her eyes. People will think you're marrying me out of pity. People can think whatever they want. We'll know the truth. He released one of her hands to gently wipe a tear from her cheek. I'm not asking for an answer now. Take time to consider. Yes, she interrupted, unable to contain the joy bursting in her heart. Yes, I'll marry you. His smile was radiant as he drew her into his arms, carefully mindful of her belly. When he kissed her, it was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. Elizabeth, watching from the stable doorway, smiled to herself before quietly retreating, leaving the couple to their private moment. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Louis, Matt, Elizabeth, and a few trusted ranch hands as witnesses. The local minister raised his eyebrows at Fiona's condition but performed the service without comment. The people of Silver Creek buzzed with the news. Some, like the Wilkerson sisters, predicted disaster. Others, including Clara and Mrs. Holloway, sent gifts and good wishes. Aaron and Fiona paid little attention to any of it, too absorbed in their newfound happiness. In October, Fiona gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom they named Hope. Aaron was by her side throughout the ordeal, his face the first thing she saw when she woke from exhausted sleep afterward. She's perfect, he said, cradling the infant with surprising confidence. Just like her mother. As winter settled over Montana, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in pristine white, the little family established their own rhythms and traditions. Fiona continued to manage the ranch books, now with Hope sleeping in a cradle beside her desk. Aaron proved to be a devoted father, often carrying the baby in a sling across his chest as he went about his work, much to the amusement and eventual emulation of his cowboys. You've changed this place, Louis remarked to Fiona one evening as they prepared dinner together. Before, it was just a ranch. Now it's a home. Spring brought new calves, wildflowers, and a letter from Boston from Fiona's mother, hesitantly reaching out after more than a year of silence. She wrote of regret, of missing her daughter, of wanting to know her granddaughter. Will you reply? Aaron asked as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. I think so, Fiona said, leaning against his shoulder. They made mistakes, so did I. But family is family. Speaking of family, Aaron said, a smile in his voice, I was thinking perhaps Hope might like a brother or sister someday, not right away, but eventually. Fiona turned her face up to his. I'd like that too. His kiss was warm and familiar now, but no less thrilling than the first. As twilight deepened around them, Fiona reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the pain and shame that had driven her west, the courage it had taken to start anew, and the love that had found her when she least expected it. The townspeople had been wrong. She had found love, and it had found her not despite her circumstances, but because the man who loved her saw beyond them to the woman she truly was. In Aaron's arms, with their daughter sleeping peacefully inside, Fiona Winters Lockhart had found not just a second chance, but a first true home.